Hello and welcome again to the Scaling Up Business Podcast. I'm your host and scaling coach, Bill Gallagher. I want to remind everyone that all of our tools are available for download, along with all of these shows. We have over 200 of these shows now available online. So on almost any subject around scaling up you can think of, you want to go to scalingcoach.com to find those things. We'll also give you a copy of the book, Scaling Up, for free if you just pay the shipping and handling. All of that and more, scalingcoach.com. So today, this is a client case study, a success story, really. We're talking with Chin Beckman of DSP Concepts. Chin, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Bill. It's a pleasure.
So guys, DSP Concepts is an audio platform. They create a tool set, and you can correct me if I describe it wrong, but I think I know you guys well, powering over 40 million of the world's best audio devices. And they're a leading supplier to the top brands out there. We're talking brands like Tesla, GoPro, Bang & Olufsen. They recently announced their Series B funding, which it created a great occasion to share and talk about the success. And that funding was participated in by folks like BMW, Ventures, Porsche, MediaTek, ARM IoT funding, and it was led by Taiwania Capital. So I'm excited to have Chin Beckman join the show. Chin is the CEO of the company, and her husband, Paul, can't join us today. He's out dealing with a family matter right now, but welcome to the show, Chin.
Yeah, thank you, Bill.
Again. So you're a husband and wife team, but you've got a funded growing company in a very exciting space. So DSP Concepts create this audio tool set that powers the audio going in and out of all the devices that we really love, the best ones out there. And things are talking to us with more and more speakers, and we're listening to them. We're hearing music on things. All of that has to work together well. It's a really hard thing to do. So tell us, how did you get into this business? Why this business? Give some background. Tell your story a little bit.
Good. Well, I like to tell people that we're the best kept secret behind all your favorite devices. And hopefully that after going through this scaling, and like you said, we received B funding, so the news is starting to get out about us, that we no longer want to be kept a secret. We want people to discover us. But like you said, we are in all the well-known products. In fact, these are the most difficult products to deal with when it comes to audio. And the reason we got into this is audio is a subset of signal processing. And signal processing by itself is a difficult subject already. So anything that we touch in the world nowadays, most things deal with some sort of digital signal processing. Now, the particular field in audio is even more aloof to people. Doing audio signal processing basically need a whole bunch of skill sets. And these are like skill sets that are not always overlapping. The only common umbrella it falls under is the love for audio. But other than that, you have PhDs with deep mathematical skill sets who need to calculate how signals are bounced around in the room, which signals are the important ones to capture, which ones you don't want to recapture, and have it feed into your microphone, for example. So you have to deal with reflections, you have to deal with all kinds of very complicated math calculations. Then you have your people who need to then convert that kind of calculation into very efficient code that runs specifically on processors. Now, it's not like a high-level code. Audio is very, very picky about being real-time, no dropouts, no distortions. And so in order for it to function very efficiently on a chip, it often needs to be whittled down all the way to assembly code, where you're moving, bits of information from memory to registers to, taking advantage of the hardware accelerations that allows you to do those calculations very quickly. That's another set of skills.
It sounds like you went to MIT, but I know Paul went there and he worked at other major companies out there and as he got started in this field, right?
That's right. So Paul got his PhD at MIT, but I credit myself for getting him into MIT because he used to copy
Good
my math homework in high school.
job.
So that's the backstory. But
Yeah, there you go.
but yes, he got his PhD from MIT under Professor Oppenheim's group, and Professor Oppenheim wrote a book that is the Bible of signal processing. So anybody who studies signal processing would have used his textbook,
Mm,
and so that's Paul's uh, you know, where he came from. And after MIT, he went to work for Dr. Bose, who was
yeah,
also a professor at MIT. And so he's very, deeply ingrained into that whole audio world. And he was the first one to bring digital signal processing into Bose. As you
yeah,
know, traditional acoustics is very much, analog. It has to do with amplifiers. And then it's not
totally.
until, you know, I guess it's not, it's old now, but, I still remember me as 20 years old. So,
Yeah,
so that's when things turned digital.
yeah, yeah. Well, I grew up in a hi-fi family, and we had all kinds of fantastic high-end hi-fi speakers and things like that. My dad, his friends were into that, and my father-in-law's super bleeding edge that, and those guys loved the old warm Macintosh tube amps and massive magnaplanar speakers and all kinds of things like that. But that's a different thing when your machine needs to, so far non our technical folks already know all this, but if you're not from a technical background, right, you've got these waveforms that you're familiar with looking at,
That's
and those
right.
have to get digitized and sampled in order
Mhm.
to for a computer to send them in or out. And then what you were speaking at as we got started is the complexity of looking at all kinds of competing waveforms, reflections, things, and picking out what is the actual signal that we're interested in.
Right. And in fact, that is what created the need of this technology. Was
Mm-hmm.
Paul graduated from MIT. He thought he was going to be inventing all these new things, and instead he found that probably 10% of the time was used for invention, 90% of the time was coding to fit it into the target processor.
A little bit of invention time and then a lot of blood, sweat, and tears actually cranking the code out, making something work.
Right. And
Mm-hmm.
therefore, as the best inventions come out of necessity. And that's where the idea sprung that he created this essentially framework, or you can call it an operating system of sorts,
Yeah.
that basically now, for people who would be entering into the workforce, unlike Paul, what we created allows people to actually do the invention. And all the crummy stuff on the bottom that has to make it work and integrate on the chip and tuning
Yeah.
it, that can be handled by us,
Mm-hmm.
DSP Concepts. And
So,
so
so how
that's
long
how
have
it
you
came
been
about.
working together as husband and wife in the business?
It's funny because we've always been interested in entrepreneurial activity. So when we entered MIT, we
Mm-hmm.
both joined the MIT Entrepreneurial Club. Now, I'm not from MIT. I actually graduated from Boston University, right across the river.
Mm-hmm.
But the entrepreneurial club at MIT was open to everybody, and I was, Paul and I were both there. So we started that since we were undergrads, and then later on into grad school, we continue to always be thinking about entrepreneurship and just meeting up with a lot of people. So it's always been in our blood veins to do something like this. And actually, DSP Concepts came about after we moved to California. Paul came here because he was asked to join a startup by a friend of his. And 2 years after the startup, he joined the startup. It pretty much got sold to another company. It was doing uh, sort of GPS, global positioning systems.
Mm-hmm.
And then after it got sold, he wanted to return to the audio roots.
Yep.
And so he did his first gig as a consultant for analog devices. Analog devices is well known for
Mm-hmm.
doing DSPs.
Mm-hmm.
So they had him go around and meet with all their customers. And then Paul realized that all the customers have the same problems. So that was exactly why we knew that we were solving a real problem. And that's how DSP Concepts came about. And our technology is called Audio Weaver. So in fact, it weaves together the pieces of algorithms that one needs
Mm-hmm.
and allows you to deploy very quickly. And so you're not spending 90% of your time coding.
Mm-hmm. And you have each found your different roles. You've really come and flexed and found your role as the CEO of the company and become quite an evangelist with it, helping with the fundraising and the business development. And Paul's continued to focus on the technology development, the engineering side. Yeah.
That's right. And Bill, thanks to you here, I think I can be very honest with your audience.
Mm.
I think I'm a reluctant CEO.
Yeah.
So when you have two founders and
Yeah.
one is a super smart technical founder, guess
Yes.
who the board's going to pick to run all the other crap?
Right.
So, yeah, I'm a reluctant CEO. But I reached out to you pretty early after
Yeah.
we raised funding
Yeah.
because I knew I needed to have a system in place. We're getting traction in the market.
Yeah.
We're hitting the right timing in the market where all the technologies is now coming together.
Yeah.
Uh, Audio is becoming a very interesting place. And so we knew we're going to have to scale. And
Right.
so I right away knew that I had to reach out to somebody for help.
Well, I mean, whether you choose to or not, everywhere around us there are speakers and microphones now, and our interfaces increasingly. As I drive down the road, I don't want to talk to my phone. I want to tell it what to do because I don't want to be looking at it and touching it as much.
Mhm.
And as I'm cooking in the thing, I'm like, "Hey, start a timer for something," and in the meanwhile, in the background, all over my house and my office, for that matter, there's Sonos speakers playing
Mhm.
music out to me, right?
Yep.
And whatever your particular brands and choices are, this audio interface is growing rapidly.
Right. Right. And let me just kind of give you some idea of what our technology is able to do.
Sure.
Um, so typically, you see, thanks to Amazon and bringing Alexa into our world, you see how these companies have tremendously big teams to develop
Yeah.
this technology. It's not a easy thing to do when
Yeah.
you have to bring together this bunch of different skill sets, and on top of that, the just the workflow process is just not easy when
Right.
doing audio development. So using Audio Weaver, we're able to implement and surpass the performance of what you can get with with Amazon, what we're used to, the Alexa
Hmm.
products, with really a very small team of engineers and in a very, very rapid, short time frame.
Mm.
So that's the power of Audio Weaver. And of course, before voice came about, we were already doing this for our customers. So you mentioned GoPro; it's one of
Yeah.
our favorite customers,
Yeah.
and we love them because they came to us. They say, we're looking for wind noise reduction algorithm because our customers are wearing our products and jumping out of airplanes or mounting them on
Right.
motorcycles.
Right.
So we can't just take one that says, oh, we can handle wind noise of up to 10 miles per hour. They
No.
said we need something that can handle 100 miles per hour.
Right. Free
So
fall.
so we said, well, okay, nobody has that. Okay, but
Yeah.
well, let us develop it for you.
Yeah.
So over one weekend, we quickly came up with iterations and we sent it to GoPro and they were like, oh my gosh, this is better than anything we've heard. And
Yeah.
so they quickly adopted to our platform. And they have very creative people, and they're innovative. And
Super.
so from the first generation that we did work with them was back in when Hero 4 came about. And
Mm.
from there, now I don't know what model are we up to now. Hero 7, 8.
Well, I have the 7. I think there's one more beyond now, but
it, now they're doing some fancy stuff. They have
yeah.
6 microphone solutions and all kinds of good stuff, and they're just able to go off and do it. and
Yeah.
and the power of the ability to iterate using like a graphical user interface is
Right.
they send out these people whose job is to just go out and do activities. That's like,
Yeah.
there's a person's job whose job all day long is to go jump off airplanes,
Yeah.
ride motorcycle, and
Yeah.
bring back recordings. And
Yeah.
they sit there and they tune their systems, and so that they can make wonderful stuff.
That's
And
awesome.
same thing with when Tesla started with their Model S. Elon has a very specific thing in mind, right? Like he really cares about his product, and apparently he's like a big audio fan,
Mm.
and so everything had to go through his approval. And so at that time, they didn't have a team. And so they hired us to help them. Their spec was 2 pages long as compared to 2,000 pages in a normal, automotive
Right.
company.
Right.
But they say, well, we just have to make it good, and we have to, this is what we want. Very simple. It wasn't very specified, but with Audio Weaver, we are able to iterate very quickly and come up. Tesla's has the highest rated sound systems,
Mm.
and same thing. They started out with our help, and now they have a very tiny team able to
Mm.
do all kinds of, like all of their audio,
Mm. Mm.
implementation. So
Mm.
that's the kind of stuff we're
That you're
enabling
doing.
people to do. Yep.
So let's talk about the growth of the business and the tools that we've applied, because not everybody's going to be in tech and not everybody's going to geek out. But I think that creates a rich picture for what you're up to. So about the time that I started working with you guys a couple of years ago, you had developed this vision for being the primary, dominant, main platform for audio processing, audio handling, that toolkit to be that platform globally.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what always attracts me, is somebody with a big vision, somebody who says, we want to create the next $1 billion company, or we want to dominate our category globally. I get really excited about that versus, hey, we want to double our thing and I want a better car.
Mm-hmm.
It's way more motivating. And there have been a lot of challenges. We're going to focus on the tools that you used along the way. But how did you come up with that vision? What gave you the audacity to take on that kind of a goal?
So what we realized was, the audio world is a very fragmented world.
Mm.
And the reason is it's always been a stepchild to everything
Mm.
else. So
Mm.
when you think about all your products, probably the first attraction you get is visual. So you can see in the video world, the graphics world, things move very quickly.
Yeah.
Whereas audio has always been a little more sleepy. We get audio and that's all good, and it doesn't need to move very quickly.
Right.
So as a result, everybody just developed their own way of doing things. So it's very fragmented, very artisanal. And when we
Good word
saw
for it in the past, anyway. Yeah.
when we saw how, like, with voice, that's where everybody got excited. So now you got people who are from non-traditional audio companies wanting to become an audio company. If you
Mm.
think about the people who are making appliances and TVs, for example, they're not really audio companies traditionally. They have so many other things to worry about, and yet they all want to put voice on it.
Mm.
So we thought, well, now there's a reason for audio to be put on the fast track. And in
Mm.
order for any market to develop into a fast track, you have to have a standard, right? So, for example, we all standardize on, PCs or Apples. You got two camps, but it's pretty much the standard. And you have standards in when you're developing web technology. You have standards on just about everything, but there was no standard in audio.
Hmm.
So we thought, okay, what if we can become that standard? Because we have actually developed this process of doing audio development that is so streamlined that it could help everybody. And once people experience it, they'll all want to have use this new way of doing things. And if
Yeah.
that's the case, and we are supporting many, many chips, okay. And the reason we keep talking about chips is at the end of the day, all your products is going to be based on some kind of a processor that runs in it. It's
Right.
a little computer that does your signal, your calculations, right? Your processing. And each chip company, you have they usually pick an application area. So if you're going to be in TVs, then you're going to have certain chip guys that are on the majority of the TV market. If you're going to be in headphones or headsets, that's going to be another set of chips because they need to worry about Bluetooth, Wi-Fi connectivity, or power consumption. And if you're going to be in industrial and appliances, that's probably another set of chips. So now you have all these different chips and application areas, and they all want voice. Well,
Right.
what better time and what better place to establish a standard, and who better to do it than us?
Mm-hmm.
So I kind of took it as a calling.
Yeah. Well, it's really great because a lot of people are far more timid in their thing. But I think that kind of a big declaring, taking on a big goal really changes who wants to play with you, who wants to join your team, what you're up to. And you saw an opening, and I think it's great. It's to be applauded. So let's go through some of the tools. You started, when we first began out, one of the first things that we did is look at the functional accountability. Who's in what seats? Who's on your bus? Talk to us just a little bit about what that was like, what difference that made.
Well, it was good to go through all the different tools that you brought with the scaling up system.
Hmm.
Um, as you know, we grew very quickly, up to for over, let's see, 2003 to 2015-ish. It was a little consulting company, no more than four people.
Hmm.
And from there, we started to grow. We are today at beginning of 2020, and we have close to 58, 9 people. We're adding people every day. So I
Hmm.
sometimes lose count.
Right.
Um, but the point is, when we started out, it was me and Paul, and we were wearing like 20 hats each, right?
Right.
And it's
Right.
figuring out like, how do we take off the hats? How do we grow in a way that is sustainable growth, at the same time passing on information enough that we
Right.
can continue to grow? And frankly, that's not that easy to do.
Well, as I started working with you, you had more bodies in there, but you didn't have yet distributed accountability. So there were lots of people helping with things, but we didn't yet have ownerships of key functions within the company beyond the technical things of the actual work you were doing.
Right, right. So that was a little bit
First
tough.
piece, yeah.
Yeah, because people do have to come up to speed,
Right.
and then learning to like assign the accountability piece is also, a learning curve for
And we
us.
did some of that also in processes. That work is ongoing as well, especially
Hmm.
as you've grown teams and gotten more sophisticated in the engagements. But now you're in a surprising number of tools and products out there, and the team's growing. We also then went into your meeting cadence and how you set priorities on a regular basis and pulling in that. What was that like?
Yeah, so in the beginning, we didn't even have a meeting cadence. It was just whenever, whatever.
Yeah.
And the meetings also tend to be more unstructured.
Right.
Um, but it now we've developed into a cadence of, certain meetings, and we kind of had to learn to adjust. Um, Sometimes it got to too many meetings, and then we cut back or consolidated meetings.
Right.
And I think the key for us is to learn that what is the purpose of the meeting and then stick to it.
Right.
And so that to us was very helpful to do that.
It's hard to do, isn't it? To focus in and not just talk about everything all the time that occurs to you.
Especially in the beginning when,
Yeah.
I mean, we're still when we're still, trying to figure out, well, what is the go-to-market strategy?
Right.
And it just feels like all the time you just want to have, just this free form conversation to like
Yeah.
hammer out and keep working on that. Um, yeah, so it was very hard to be disciplined and determining
I
who
think
the
it's really
meeting is
hard to
for.
go from that early stage forming, figuring things out company and then impose some of these rigors. If you didn't have any background in it, we just had a SaaS company spend a 3-day offsite laying out all the things that they need to do at startup
Hmm.
before they were operating, and then start to build in their team and their work around it. And they move very quickly through the revenue stages, joined a prominent business investment accelerator, and then have grown significantly through then. But these were folks who'd been down the road a couple times, right?
Yeah. It always seems much easier when you join a company that has a established process.
Yeah,
That's what one thing I learned is as a startup, we just didn't have any process.
yeah,
So when I hire people thinking that, oh, they excelled in certain skill sets and they come in, it turns out that that's not always what we need, because it's easier when somebody comes from a company that already has process. But here we are trying to build the machine. The machine isn't going yet.
yeah.
Yeah.
So then along the way, you take a casual, informal, somewhat default kind of culture and begin to build a more intentional, thoughtful culture that's aligned to your strategy. What's that been like in the company? Have you had resistance to that? What did you discover? What's it made easier?
So the culture piece has always been pretty clear to me. So
Mm,
even before I engaged you, we already had pretty much the core values that we wanted to keep.
yeah.
Um, I think the tough part is the enforcing the culture. And I
Yes.
remember in one of your meetings, early ones, y- where you talk about traditions, okay,
Yeah.
and you enforce your culture by repeating that
Right.
constantly. And then you said something that's always kind of burned into my mind. He's like, you said, to keep the culture, what is it, the thing that you will sacrifice, even financially, take a
Yeah.
hit
Yeah.
and throw somebody off,
Yeah.
you know, to maintain the culture? So
Yeah.
that's the hard part.
It's really hard, yeah. And sometimes it's hard to recognize it when you're in the middle of dealing with it. You don't go, "Wait a minute, this person just doesn't fit our culture."
Yeah.
Or this in our last business, one of our values was products we were proud of,
Hmm.
and and I remember we would get in different production batches and they'd come through receiving and go to the warehouse and shipping and that kind of thing. And somebody would call it out. They'd be like, this just doesn't look great or right. And so that would always be a all stop emergency. People would come in, they'd consult, we decide, are we proud of it? Are we not? What do we need to do? Do we send it back? And frequently, we would send things back to get fixed, and we would end up losing money on whatever that was because we still had a need for it, and it fit an overall mix for a client. But we were willing to sacrifice that in service of the larger thing of upholding that value of not putting out things that we weren't proud of.
Hmm. Right. Yeah.
Sometimes very expensive
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
painful explaining to people, well, there's going to be a delay on that item or like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you've grown now from 4 people to 30 people, 55, now 59. You've started to use some of the interviewing techniques, the job scorecards. You're bringing it. It's a big focus in the coming year with your new funding. Talk about the growth of the team size and what's happening now.
Yeah. So we didn't grow too much last year,
Mm,
surprisingly, but we
hmm
doubled revenue last year.
Yeah.
And this year we're expecting to, double revenue. But
Yeah.
this year we are also doubling in our, team size.
Yeah.
And last year, all of the sales were still inbound, but this year we're building up more of the outbound going, sales organization,
Right.
customer support, sort of customer facing engineers. And so that's where we're growing. And then relatively smaller growth on the product side, but
Mm.
still some amount of growth.
Hmm.
So we're basically, if I could do it, turn back the clock and do it again, as a startup, one mistake I think we made was, as a startup, there's so much to do and you would just hire bodies to do things. So we always wanted
Yeah.
to hire people to do things.
Yeah.
But if I could go back, it would be, we need to hire more management. So it's
Yeah.
it's like we need to spread out sort of these executive functions, to make decisions and
Yeah.
stuff like that. And that would have been, sort of a easier growth in, maybe, I don't know. But that was part of the thing. It's like, you get stretched so thin, uh, having to manage all kinds of detail that that in hindsight, if I could hire in the senior team and then let them help hire what's
Right.
underneath, that might have
I think a
been a
lot of
little
times that
easier.
happens for people in their second, third, fourth company
Hmm.
where they have a cadre of people that they know and can pull from. It gets
Right.
in the leadership space that it gets easier to do that.
Right.
It's interesting. So we've got a growth going on. You guys just secured another round. You've allocated a bunch of that, but as we talk right now, we've got significant international crises going on with major financial market impacts and economic impacts, and it's not yet clear how that. By the time this show is aired, it may be clearer. But undoubtedly, with this, there will be some opportunities to people get freed up.
Hmm.
You'll have hopefully some more talent. You may be able to buy technology teams, customers, other kinds of things like that as well in this time frame. We haven't even talked about that. It's
Hmm.
not more of a question, but just kind of top of mind. I'm sure you're thinking about it a little bit.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah. So I am being a little cautious as well.
Of course.
But all of our planned hires are still in place.
Yeah.
Um, So I haven't seen like a slowdown quite yet, because our products are often used in starting at the early phase, right? The R&D phase of
Right.
a product. So that continues on. That's not going to stop. But where it may be greatly impacted, maybe on the production side, when, with the factories and the
Oh,
shipping
could
of the
be right.
products,
Could
right?
be. But I think the category is going to, people will work around that before you know it. And that I think will be temporary in your space in particular. If all you did was live concert sound tuning, we
Mm-hmm.
might have an issue because that'll
Yeah.
go pretty quiet for a while.
Yeah.
I don't mean to laugh. That's a
But there's a
impacting people who are
ripple
going to be
effect,
impacted.
It's like, if the
Yeah.
economy, if there's a reduction in force, then people aren't gonna go out and buy a new feature, a voice speaking appliance,
Uh,
right?
I think in your side, well, anytime an economy shrinks, the overall thing shrinks very little, but the
Mhm.
dislocations are large. So
Mhm.
there will be serious winners, and all the conferences that I speak at,
Mm.
and many of our team meetings are moving increasingly online. So the need for audio and video conferencing and remote work and that kind of thing, that's all things that are part of your world.
Yes.
All that stuff goes up.
Yeah, and
So
you know what? It's too late that I just found out. So March Madness, been canceled, right?
yes, yes,
Well, it would have been good if we could have delivered a software that people can watch from home, fans can participate,
right.
and then, based on your cheers, it actually comes out on the, at the stadiums,
Oh, a virtual, yeah, and
virtual fan base.
empty. Wow, you go right to big vision. I love that. No, didn't occur to me at all. Well, I think we've given some folks a lot to think about. You had had some ability and skill in an area. You saw an opportunity, created a really massive vision. You started to grow the team, get the functions aligned, build the culture, the right meeting and execution habits in. And now starting to bring good people skills around the interviewing, hiring, recruiting, and the development of people over time. You've attracted a whole big round of funding and are poised for continued growth. And I'm really excited to keep working with you guys. And hopefully some of our listeners will hear something for themselves in all this.
Yes. Yes.
So if you want to find out more about Chin Beckman and the DSP Concepts team, just go to dspconcepts.com and check them out. All their stuff is available online there, and you can read all about the company and their cool tools and things like that. Thanks again, Chin, for coming on the show and talking with us today. My best to Paul and the family in this time. Yeah.
Thank you, Bill.
Well, if the show is helpful, please tell somebody else about it. All the world, we need to help each other as much as we can right now. So pass it along, turn somebody else onto the show. If you like it, if you give us a review, that helps us. And if you subscribe, it helps you to get them every week. You can also drop us a line, send us an email, info@scalingcoach.com. Big thanks to Vern Harnish, author and creator of the Scaling Up Framework and the original Rockefeller Habits. The show was produced by Lucy Summers. The audio is edited by Albert Burge at Podfly Productions. And our show notes are compiled by Ein Kodina, proofread by Tim McGowan. Thanks again for listening. Keep scaling up.